Life is a journey. It's not about where you end up, but how you get there, is a wise saying. Sharing her journey is a very interesting woman here with me today, Tara Hum. Thank you so much, Tara, for being here and sharing your life journey across generations.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So, Tara, you come from two very influencing cultures,
Yeah.
Chinese and Canadian.
Yes.
So, if I ask you, how would you describe your roots? Where would you take me?
Well, it's sort of hard to describe. I'm third generation, and there's a lot of Canadian influence, right, in my life. Being born and raised here, but we do have sort of the old traditions and stuff that still have carried through from my grandparents, my parents, and to myself, right. My grandfather was originally born in mainland China, in a village called Taishan. And at early teens or so, his family moved him to Hong Kong. And so that's where he lived. He worked actually as a soldier's sort of page boy, and that's what he did there
Right.
for a little bit, and kind of grew up.
So, a little bit of Hong Kong influence
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Hong Kong is a small little island.
It is.
It is south, very close to
south of sort of mainland China.
China. And
Yeah, and it was under British rule for the longest time as a British
Right.
colony from
Yeah.
1842 to about 1997. But it's sort of been its own unique.
characteristic.
Yeah.
It's the global hub for financial
It is.
systems, right?
Yeah, and I imagine the skyline has changed.
I do hear and I see those in
Right.
pictures.
Yeah.
I've never had the opportunity to go to Hong Kong.
Neither have I, unfortunately.
Yeah, but yeah, once I would definitely like to go. It has its
yeah.
own characteristics.
So
yeah.
would I. People have told me. I mean, from the skyline to the food to the culture, everything is very interesting there.
And it
so.
has its a separate governance and economic systems
It
than the
does.
mainland China.
It does, and
Yeah.
and you can see now with the sort of political, uprisings that are
they're
happening.
in the news, yeah.
It's very prominent in the news right now.
Right.
As China's sort of slowly trying to, peel back some of the freedoms that they
They
have,
had given,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So taking us back to
Yes.
about your grandfather.
Yeah. And so my grandfather met my grandmother in Hong Kong. She, as a young girl, her story is actually very interesting. Both of them are very poor. They didn't have very much money. They weren't upper
Farming.
class.
They were from
yeah.
farming class. Okay.
Yeah, upper class folk, right? Her story, and this is all through, of course, word of mouth and whatnot. Nothing's officially recorded in written records or anything. But her story is that as a young girl, her father brought her to a public park or something, and left her there and said, wait here. And what had happened was this woman came to pick her up, and she went to go live with this woman as their daughter is what.
And that woman was Chinese?
Yep, she was a Chinese
She
woman.
was a Chinese woman.
Yep, and she was sort of adopted into this family. She wasn't really one of the kids. She was more of a servant of and
the
helped
family.
around.
Wow.
The household. And her and my grandfather met in Hong Kong, married at a very young age, as they did back in those days. So I think in their late teens they were married, and she had my mom's eldest sibling, my uncle, in Hong Kong,
Okay.
in that area, and then just after that, my grandfather decided to immigrate to Canada. And that's sort of where our Canadian journey started, right? The sort of the Canadian leg of our family's journey.
Have you tried to ask us why Canada? How did they choose?
You know what? I've never asked them.
Yeah.
I know that there was a sort of a large Chinese community in Ottawa. People that they probably would have known and would have sort of come over. I often wonder why they didn't go somewhere warm like Australia or New Zealand.
Do you ask them now?
Right, especially living in Thunder Bay. Why don't you choose somewhere warmer? But Canada's a wonderful country. I definitely don't regret having them move here. But you sort of do wonder why they choose one country over another.
Oh, over another. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Even or where they settle. Why not Vancouver or Toronto or even down in the States, right?
Sometimes it's the community
Yep.
that draws them, or economic
Yeah,
opportunities. You never know.
yeah, and sort of what can come from that. So,
So then your parents settled down in Ottawa.
yep. So my grandparents settled in Ottawa, and so my grandfather came probably in about 1956 or so. My grandmother, on the other hand, until he had enough money, he worked as a cook, and he sent money back to her, and then she came over with my uncle.
Cooking Chinese food.
Yep, cooking Chinese food, and the community was even back then very strong. So they had Chinese churches and Chinatown and markets and restaurants and
Okay, back
everything.
then,
Yeah,
yeah.
even back then, laundromats and all that stuff. So even till this day, my grandparents are very loath to speak English to us. And they keep insisting that we learn Cantonese or the dialect
Okay.
that they speak. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're not.
You don't.
not-
Yeah. So then
yeah.
how do you communicate?
It's often looks of
Lots of hugs.
confusion. Yeah, a lot of confusion. A lot of sort of just eating. I love yous and how are yous and things like that, right? So not too many in-depth conversations. So we get a lot of things from other family members who can speak the language well enough to share.
So when you hear stories about their journey,
Yes.
you hear it from your uncles.
Uncles or aunts, friends of the family, people like that, family members, cousins who can speak the language.
How did your parents adapt to the place?
To Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, they were born here.
They were born here.
Both of them
okay.
were born here. At home, I find it interesting. At home, the language they would have spoken would have been, Cantonese or a
Right.
dialect thereof. But their English is perfect. They've never had accents or any type of language barriers or anything. So I imagine just by going to school, they went to English schools. That's sort of how they learned and adapted. And then most of their friends, other than their family members, were probably Caucasian Canadians, right?
The same with you, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah? You being the third generation.
Yeah.
And if you have parents, I've tried to speak, but they pick up a few words. Like I'm talking
Yes.
about my children, they would
Yes.
pick up a few words that is,
Yep.
which they would like to use. But the rest of the discussion is in English.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That happens that way.
Yeah, and it's funny, my parents, as kids, the commands, sit down, or, don't do that, and, be quiet, all these
Those
things.
are in Chinese.
They're in Chinese, right? So they can say it in stores or something, and in public, right? But generally speaking, we grew up speaking English and French, went to French immersion, and they grew up, with all their friends speaking English as well. So, it's you can see the Canadian influence for sure.
So
going
when
through.
you were growing up in the midst of generations and generations, and I'm sure the gatherings, the home family gatherings would be
Yes.
huge
Always
with
big.
everybody.
Always big, always fun. So my mom is one of 7, and then the next generation, myself and my cousins, we're brother and sister as well. There's 11 of us, right?
Oh.
So and each generation just keeps getting bigger and
Bigger.
bigger.
Hold on to that story because we want to know a little bit more about your cousins
Right.
and growing up with them on one hand, and then having your Canadian or Caucasian friends.
Right.
How was that balance
Right.
done? We'll be right back, dear viewers. Stay tuned. You're watching Asian Vibes. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Asian Vibes, and my guest today is Tara Hum. Tara, the meaning of Tara
Yes.
in my language is star. A
Oh,
star,
really?
yeah, isn't it so cute?
Interesting, and it's an Irish name, and people
Is that
always say-
right?
yeah, it's the hill where the kings live or
Oh, wow.
something. Yeah.
And it's a very common name in
Really?
our in Indian culture, but yeah, it's a very, very sweet name.
I didn't know
It's
that.
short and nice.
Oh, cool.
So before we went our break, you were telling us about this big family events.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about them.
So family
What's the
events.
chaos, the confusion,
Yeah.
the chatters, and the food, and
Family events are always loud.
Yeah.
They're never quiet. If it's quiet, something's wrong, right?
yes, it's a happy time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. So, my mom's generation, it's half women, half men. In our generation, for the longest time, all the children they had were all girls. So it was 10 girls and only one boy, so my brother.
Okay.
So it's always been very loud. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of, singing, laughing, talking, everything like that. And food is always a huge portion.
Integral part, yes.
Yeah. So that's always been very, very important. You're not done until you're ready to burst, right?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to leave without leftovers and etc.
Right.
And food is one of those things that always brings us together.
True.
We love having family dinners. Traditional food there. We always celebrate Christian holidays or holidays that Canadians will celebrate, like Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, but we always have a Chinese element to it.
A dumpling or a spring
There's always
roll.
dumplings and egg rolls and noodles and things like that.
Us.
Curry. There's always something like that.
All right. Okay.
That always goes with it, and it's funny because as we've gotten older, my generation's gotten older, our spouses and our partners aren't Chinese. And so when they attend our events, it's always like, oh, well, what's this? Oh, that's dumplings, or that's, that's oxtail soup or something, or something like that, right? That they wouldn't usually have at one of their events. So
right.
Yeah.
And they'll try to learn.
They try to learn. It's kind of nice. I think most of the spouses we have, they're not picky. I know my partner in particular, he absolutely loves, Chinese cooking and Chinese flavors and whatnot. And he's probably a better cook than I am. So
Chinese food?
Chinese food.
Right.
Yes.
And how does he, which is in any particular dish, or
Well,
how did he learn to do?
Yeah, and he looks up on the internet, of course, to get ideas. There's tons of stuff out there for cultural, influences on food. But what he'll often do is that he'll make it and I'll try it. And I'll say, well, you know what, this is what, this is kind of what I would do differently to kind of get a different flavor, right? There's always...
There's a lot of intricacy when you do those doughs and things like that, right?
There is. And he actually made homemade dumplings.
Okay.
Yes, one time, which I thought was fantastic. Because in Thunder Bay, I find there's not really a huge, dumpling.
You get them, but they're kind of toned down.
Yes, it's not the same. So he made some, and there's a he was trying to knead the dough and whatnot.
Right.
And I remember saying to him, like, oh, when we were kids, we'd watch my grandma and watch my mom and my aunts do it.
Do it in a particular way.
In a particular way, and we would practice as kids on Play-Doh or throw pillows, actually. Just as doing the motion.
To the practice. Yeah. Okay.
And then I sort of showed him how to do it too.
And you have traditional terms for these very techniques.
Well, we call it chai te, which is just kneading the dough. Is essentially what it means.
So you explained him kneading the dough.
Kneading the dough and all that stuff, and how we would do and the consistency you want so that you could fold it. I mean, I'm no expert myself, and it's kind of funny because my grandma, she just does it, right?
Oh wow!
They're never the same.
So quick
and they're so quick. There's no the recipe isn't the same twice.
I know.
Yeah,
I don't know how much of these, there's little details to nuances of lifestyles are we going to, retain and followed or continued with the next generation.
And that's sort of the hard thing.
Sometimes,
it's hard to carry it through because even with food, you notice the way your grandma does it is one way. The next generation try to replicate it, not quite the same, and then 2 generations out, it's even it's even more Canadianized, and stuff like that.
And then you get the ready-made dough from the market. Exactly. You tried to
get the dough from the fridge at the superstore, so you don't do all that work.
Which pieces of traditions have you, Tara, tried to gather and follow and any particular festivity that comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, Chinese New Year is always a big event, right? There's always traditions that come with it. Most people sort of know them now. We have the little red envelopes, right, filled with money, so that you give that away.
What does that mean? So the elders give it to the children?
So the older generation will give it to the younger ones, so long as you're not married. You can't be married.
Oh, okay.
I think my sister still gets them, but she's just
all right.
Yeah, she's still playing the game. But so they give it to you for good luck, right? It's to bring you good luck in the new year.
I see. And when you get married, it means you've gone to another family.
Yes.
So that tradition does not.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, you get sort of the new
You
family.
were mentioning
mentioned
about
that.
washing your hair, something about that.
Yeah, so it's a tradition, and I still do it to this day.
Really?
Oh yeah.
What is
It's
this?
and what it is that you're not supposed to clean your home or wash your hair on the day of the Lunar New Year. So on that day, because it supposedly washes away your luck. So you clean your house and do all your cleaning, laundry, washing beforehand, and then on that day you don't wash any of the good luck away. So I still do that. It's a superstition, but I live by it. I never wash my hair on Chinese New Year. I make my mom remind me to do it. Because I forget what day it is, so she always texts me usually the week before, the day before, the day of, not to wash my hair.
But you know
and
what?
things like that.
It's slightly opposite for in my culture,
Right.
where we think the New Year is a new beginning.
Right.
So everything is done fresh, and cleaning and everything is done on that day.
Okay.
So that's the beginning of a new
Right. A new slate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Interesting, right?
Yeah, and it's a tradition I follow, and I make my partner do it too. So I don't want any bad luck in my house. So it's just,
It's just embracing some of these beliefs,
Yes.
and there is no harm, and there's just it's just goodness in all of these traditions.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I wish it carries forward and
Yeah.
go. What about your the Chinese community in Thunder Bay? Have you been able to meet anyone from?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of international students. I
Yeah.
haven't met though a lot of Chinese, Thunder Bay, like permanent Thunder Bay
Permanent,
residents.
yeah.
Though it's
Alright.
one of those things where, through work or
Right.
going to a restaurant or something, you'll meet them, but the actual interaction or building more of an acquaintance with them, it's not. Yeah, it's not something I've really had the chance to do. And I find as well, Thunder Bay doesn't really have like a Chinatown or anything.
Yeah, no,
right?
it doesn't. Yeah.
So, you can go to Chinatown
Yeah,
in
no.
Ottawa or Toronto, and there's a huge Chinese
Huge,
population.
yeah, it's also a matter of the size and
Yeah,
the scale.
yeah, exactly, right? Thunder Bay is a smaller city center, so it's not as prominent here, but.
Hold on to that thought, Tara.
Okay.
We'll come back and talk more about the Chinatowns.
Right.
Be right back, dear viewers. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Asian Vibes, and my guest is Tara. Tara, you were talking about generations and how we're blending,
Yes.
across generations, one leading to the other, and like you said, it's a melting pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there is still that interest to embrace roots, our roots. We're always, when we go to a community, any place, you're always looking out for, things that you kind of recognize or relate, or
Right.
something that you want to hold on to, cling
Yes.
on to.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of the new generations?
Yeah, I mean, for new generations, I think, the world is getting smaller and smaller, I
Oh,
find.
yes,
Right? From social media to the internet, everything's available.
We hardly do any writing these days.
No,
it's
no.
not.
I can't
That's
read my own anyway, so it's good that we can type everything.
Okay.
But that's what I'm finding is that as the generations continue and more people are immigrating to Canada, and more people are bringing their cultures, their food, their traditions to this country, but while also mixing in with Canadian traditions as well. You sort of see that, and especially in my generation with my brothers and sisters, my cousins, you can kind of really notice how Canadian culture has influenced us. I did an ancestry DNA test, actually.
You did a DNA test?
Yeah, the ancestry DNA thing.
Okay.
And pretty much my DNA is 100% Chinese. That's
Yes,
what it said, right?
Okay.
And generations past, there's always Chinese people would marry Chinese people, or
Maybe the following
Yeah.
generations, the DNA might change.
you're right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I looked at sort of the landscape of my generation's spouses and partners and whatnot, and not one of them is Chinese. And I think that's a really big sort of Canadian influence, right? These sort of different cultures and people now.
How do your parents or how do the second generations
Right.
accept the?
I mean, even my parents'
New
generation,
influences,
half of my mom's siblings married Caucasian people, and half of them married Chinese people, right? So it's sort of been a slow development, I guess.
Mosaic, the landscape,
Yeah.
the mosaic of our families are
Exactly.
also changing.
Yeah, and sort of a mishmash of all these people coming together.
I wonder when we talk about this mishmash and the melting pots,
Yeah.
Sometimes I am lost between, we celebrate all the festivities that we are of Canada,
Right.
but at the same time, I have my own gods and goddesses,
Right.
my
Yes.
religion,
Yeah.
and sometimes it is a little confusing explaining that to the next generation.
It is. It's true. And, especially growing up with, all your friends are,
Yeah.
at least for me, a lot of them we're Caucasian. So
Right.
trying to get explaining Chinese New Year's, explaining these things, it's something that we just did automatically, that we knew what
Yeah,
to do,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting for all our partners and spouses who come into it to sort of learn how things work, learn the traditions, learn the different types of foods that go with it, and all that stuff. But it's interesting, and it's nice that they want to learn. It's nice that they're involved in it, that they're curious about it. And I hope, moving forward to the next generation, hypothetically, if my partner and I had children, they'd be, 50% Chinese and 50% British, right? So it's a completely different, DNA and cultures that would just blend together. So
Yeah, when you talk of cultures, there's so many expressions. We talk of food.
Yep.
That's where we begin with. Yeah,
Yep.
the food is so integral. We begin with food. We
Yep.
begin with lifestyles, traditions, and all of these expressions.
Yes,
But it's also growing into an identity of that person,
it is.
embracing all of these cultures.
Yes, and it's one of those things.
And you stand proud that
Yeah.
I'm so and so.
Yes. And it makes a big difference, right? The influence that you grow up with these traditions, and it makes a big difference in the person you become someday.
Right.
The traditions, you're stoic, or if you're emotional or something like that, it's all part of the family and the upbringing you have,
Most
right?
important is to embrace them.
Yeah, exactly.
What brought you to Thunder Bay, Tara?
Thunder Bay, I know, and everyone asks that.
Everyone asks
And
that.
I'm sure my parents are wondering when we're coming home and
Aw.
everything. But Thunder Bay, so I came to Thunder Bay originally in 2013.
Right.
I came here for law school. I was one of the inaugural members of the Boreal Alaskan Faculty of Law
Okay.
at Lakehead University.
Wow.
And at the time, I remember coming to Thunder Bay and thinking, I can't wait to get back to Ottawa because there's not too much going on here. But Thunder Bay is an absolutely wonderful city. It's, it has the outdoors, but it also has a wonderful cultural element as well. Some of the restaurants here are some of the best I've ever been to, really.
Really?
Yeah. So I came here in 2013 thinking I was going to leave at the end of law school, and ended up staying. I've been practicing here in town for the past 3 years. My partner also went to Lakehead. He got in as soon as I finished.
Okay.
Right. So we decided, let's move up here. And then he's finished school now and working full time as well. And we own a house here, and we have pretty much our roots are,
And our roots is.
Yeah,
Can you
they've
see
traveled.
the journey?
Yeah.
From a little farming village in
Right.
Hong Kong.
Right.
I mean, if just going back 3 generations,
Yep.
and to far, far north,
Yep.
North America, Canada, Ottawa, Thunder Bay. I mean,
Yep.
what an amazing journey.
And that's
eh?
that's sort of what happens, right?
Sometimes you just sit back and think, where we come from, and all that, the entire the journey that also gives you the learning.
Exactly. And it really, and it's a very short span of time, right?
Yeah.
It's my grandparents,
very-
and then me, and then my parents and myself, right?
Absolutely.
And we sort of they've gone from that little village to Canada, and then I'm here up in northern Ontario, which is very different from southern Ontario, even,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So it's you never know where life takes
Oh
you.
yeah, even that difference. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, embracing that too.
Yes.
Any messages before we wrap up this beautiful conversation?
No, I just think this is wonderful. Even Asian vibes. It's bringing bringing awareness to the different people who make part of Thunder Bay great as well.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I hope more and more of this stuff
And
comes
there are,
about.
like we cannot be clubbed all together. Like you're from Asia, I'm from Asia,
Yes.
but we're not all the same. Yeah,
Exactly.
we have very, very distinct,
Very distinct cultures.
cultures, and everything that comes with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And it's very different. But it's nice when we can also mix our own cultures together.
Absolutely.
Right. and have that as well.
And weave those tapestry of cultures. Yeah?
Exactly. Yes.
On that note, thank you so much, Tara. It was absolutely wonderful
Thank you.
talking to you, Tara.
Thanks for
and I
having
hope we
me.
continue our discussions and getting to know each other. Thank you
Yes,
so
thank
much,
you.
dear viewers. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Asian Vibes. Till we meet again, stay well.